Hello, I'm Diane Windingland with Virtual Speech Coach, and today I'll be talking about easy PowerPoint for speakers. PowerPoint is a great tool used all over the world for business presentations. It can help you have maximum impact and give your presentation visual support. Before I go any further, I wanted to say thank you for inviting me to speak at your conference. Well, I hope that says thank you. I looked it up in Google Translate. PowerPoint, as I mentioned, is used all over the world for business presentations. Unfortunately, many business presentations using PowerPoint don't use it very effectively. In the United States, we have a phrase called death by PowerPoint. You don't want to give another boring PowerPoint presentation, do you? Well, what usually starts a presentation off with being boring is that people start out with their very first slide being a boring agenda slide, where they just talk about what they're going to talk about. So my first suggestion, when you are doing a PowerPoint presentation, don't start out the very first thing with an agenda slide. Have a little story, a little anecdote, maybe some interesting picture like this, another boring PowerPoint presentation. And then if you want to move on to your boring agenda slide, go ahead, because people do like to know where you're going to be going with the presentation. In today's presentation, we'll be learning about how to plan your presentation for maximum effect, not just planning right in PowerPoint. You'll discover 4 easy design principles. You'll learn a few tips and tricks for using PowerPoint. And you'll learn how to deliver with confidence. Well, here's a little bit about me. I'm a communications expert. I've written a few books on communication. I'm a presentation coach, and I'm also a professional speaker on communication skills. Enough about me. So you want to plan your presentation before you even get to PowerPoint. You want to start with why. Why does your audience care? Your presentation shouldn't be all about you. You need to know why your audience would care. After you know why your audience cares, then you can start planning. There's many ways you can plan. You can plan on paper. You can use a whiteboard. You can use some brainstorming software. One of my favorite ways to plan is the Post-it notes, the little sticky notes that you can put all over the wall. But don't start your planning in PowerPoint. When I was originally planning this presentation, I took ideas and wrote them on Post-it notes. They didn't look this organized. I had them all over the door. And then I decided to put them in categories or sections that flowed logically. So after I did my brainstorming, I put my Post-it notes in logical sections to progress the way I wanted to. This is a great way to do your planning before you even get to the computer. What about design? PowerPoint is a great tool, but all too often people just make it bullet point after bullet point. And really, that's kind of boring, and that's why people talk about death by PowerPoint. So today, you'll discover 4 easy design principles. Go big, the rule of thirds, contrast, and less is more. Let's look at go big first. Here's a PowerPoint slide that's not too bad. I have a title on the top and I have a picture. I've seen many worse PowerPoint slides, but there's one simple thing that you can do to give your slides more impact, and it doesn't take a lot of skill, and that is just to go big with your picture. let the picture take up the whole screen. And in your viewer's mind, they actually see things as extended beyond the edge of the picture, so it becomes even bigger. If you want, you could add some words in your picture as well. What about the rule of thirds? Well, this is a photographer's secret. If you're into photography at all, you probably already know this. So here's another basic PowerPoint slide, title and a picture. And you already know it can have more impact if we simply go big. But for some of your pictures, consider a different composition. What if you use what I call the rule of thirds? And in photography, what that means is you divide your frame into thirds, both horizontally and vertically. And then you put the most interesting things where the lines intersect. As you can see, the blue dots, those are the PowerPoints of your PowerPoint. So here, I just cropped the picture of the tree a little bit differently, and I moved the horizon so it was at one of the 1/3 lines. I could have also put the horizon here as well. This just gives it a little more intriguing look. And there it looks without the lines. Now you don't have to get it exactly perfect. You can just sort of guesstimate where the 1/3 is. You can do the same thing with people. This is my youngest son, and we were on vacation, and what I did when I cropped the picture was to crop it so that his face was in the upper 1/3 PowerPoint and the horizon was at about the 1/3 level. Just a more interesting crop than having your subject always in the middle. Contrast. Well, there's a few things you should know about contrast. One is you have to look at the visual contrast in terms of readability for your slide. Is this slide easy to read? Probably not that easy, especially if I didn't have a very good lighting system, because the background and the words are too close to the same color. But then when I make a greater contrast between the background and the words, it becomes easy to read. You also want to contrast your information. Here's an example of a family in the United States and how much they eat in a typical week and how much they spend. About $342. That's quite a lot of money in the U.S. Here's a family from Chad in Africa, and they only spend about $1.23 a week. That's a lot different. But when I showed these two slides, the USA slide and the Chad slide, that contrast maybe wasn't as noticeable as it could be. There's a few things you can do. The main thing I wanted to focus on was the difference in the money. So I simply could point out the difference in the money between the US and Chad. Or, you've probably heard that a picture is worth 1,000 words. There's the family from the US and their weekly food consumption. That's a lot of food. And then the family from Chad. Not so much. When you show pictures, the pictures tell a story, especially when you have pictures of people's faces. We connect emotionally with pictures of people's faces. So consider using pictures to tell your story. I could have simply told you this family only spends $1.23 a week on food, rather than giving you the numbers on a screen. Less is more. If there is only one thing that you take away from this presentation, let it be this: less is more. So what do you think the number one problem is when it comes to PowerPoint presentations? Too much information. That's information, 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 written over and over again. Now maybe you now can see the word significance. It was there all the time. But because there was so much information on the slide, significance was lost. What was important was lost because there was too much information. So try to have only one idea per slide. Don't put more than one if you can help it, so that people can focus on the one idea. You may have heard of how many bullet points and how many words you can have on a slide. Well, there is a rule called the 6x6 rule. Let me tell you what that is. It's no more than 6 bullets per slide, no more than 6 words per bullet. Don't wrap your points past one line, which means you only want it to go to one line and not come around to a second line. Fade your bullets in one at a time, the way I'm doing right now, showing you one bullet point at a time. Well, this rule is better than wall of text or having a paragraph of writing, but I think it's kind of boring. It's still too much information. Do you really like when you see slide after slide of bullet points? I know I don't. What you can do is, instead of always having bullet points, and it's okay to have a few now and then, is to make information visual, to reduce the number of slides that you have with bullet points. So here's an example of my family. I could do it with bullet points. I was born in the state of Oregon. My first son was born in California. My daughter was also born in California. And my son was born in Russia. We adopted him from Russia. My husband was born in South Korea. Well, that's okay, but maybe there's a more interesting way to present this information, a more visual way. What about using a map? And there I am, born in the western U.S. My son, also born in California in the western U.S. My daughter, also born in California. My son, Yuri, born in Russia. And my husband, Kim, born in South Korea. This is a little bit more interesting than just using bullet points. When you're discussing a concept, again, you could use bullet points. So here is a slide for a presentation that I give on leadership. I used to have a slide that looked just like this, where I was talking about situational leadership. And I would say situational leadership is all about leaders, followers, and the situation. Well, that's not so bad, but maybe there's a more interesting, more visual way of showing that information. So this is a redo on this slide. Situational leadership is all about leaders, followers, and the situation. This is more likely to be remembered by the people at the presentation than just a bulleted list. Here's an example of when I took a survey of some people before I did a webinar on PowerPoint. And this was a table of the responses. And the question was, how many PowerPoint presentations have you attended in the last 3 months? And you can see the responses from 0, 1 to 2, 3 to 5, more than 5 presentations. Well, this gives the information, but maybe there's alternative ways of giving this information. You could use a bar graph. That's a little bit more visual. You could use a pie chart, although for this particular type of data, with all of these different colors, I'm not all that keen. What I really wanted to know was the number who attended 3 or more presentations in a particular time period. So I took that previous pie chart and I simply colored in yellow all of these blocks so that you could see how many attended 3 or more. You could be a little creative. Here I have a photograph with a PowerPoint presentation in the background and the information. 73% attended a PowerPoint presentation in the past 3 months. This is important. One of the things I've noticed is as people start using PowerPoint, some of them get really excited about all the cool animations that you can do with PowerPoint. Well, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do. So don't overdo your animations. Overdone animations are distracting. If you want a professional look, use Fade or Appear animations. There's a tab, the Animations tab, that you can choose what kind of animations you want. And I suggest to keep it simple and to use either Appear or Fade. When you have your transitions between slides, you can get really fancy in your slide transitions, but really fancy is distracting. So I suggest for slide transitions between slides that you simply use a fade, something very conservative that isn't distracting. So you might have fun with animations, maybe on one slide, but don't get crazy on all your slides. The 4 easy design principles that you can take away and start applying right away, and they're not even that technical, are go big with your pictures. Let the picture take up the whole slide. Try the photographer's secret, the rule of thirds, where you don't always have your subject right in the middle. Have a more interesting composition from time to time. Contrast. Make sure that your background and your text has enough contrast that it's easy to see, and that you also have contrast in your information to highlight what's most important. And most importantly, less is more. Try to have only one idea per slide. Don't fill every slide with bullet points because people can be overwhelmed with information. So try to keep it simple for them. A few tips and tricks that you might use as you're working on your PowerPoint. We'll be talking about sections, picture placement, remove the background of a picture, making text pop. Organize and plan your PowerPoints with sections. As you're working on PowerPoint, you can just do slide after slide after slide. But I like to use sections to help me plan, especially if I have a very long presentation. So there's a tab, not a tab, there's a little drop-down box for sections. And you can have, I have different sections. I have the intro section, a plan section, a design section, tips and tricks, and within each section I then worked on those slides. And one advantage of doing that is if I decided I didn't want a section, I could delete a whole section, or if I wanted to move my sections around, it was very easy to move the sections around as well. When you want to see all of your slides, you should notice that near the bottom of your screen you have some things you can choose, and one of them is the slide sorter view. It has pictures of 4 little slides, and when you click it, you'll get to see all your slides at once or by section if you have it in sections. Picture placement. What does this eye tracking study tell you? There are 2 pictures here. One is of a baby facing forward and the text, and in the other one, the baby is facing the text. Where you see the red and the yellow is where people's eyes look the most. So here, with the baby facing forward, people look mostly just at the baby's face. We are very drawn to faces, so keep that in mind. In this other one, the baby's facing the text. So people still look at the baby's face, but they also look at the direction that the baby is looking. So consider that. Here's an example of what you don't want to do. This is a very nice picture of an attractive woman. She's looking off to the side. She's not even looking at the text. So an easy fix for this is to simply move the picture to the other side so that she is looking at the text. You can also do things like flip pictures, for example. Sometimes you want to remove the background of a picture because it's too busy, or you just want the background of your slide to be the background rather than having the background of the picture. When I wanted to do the picture of my family and have a picture of the world as the part where I had my family show up, I found this online picture of a map of the world, and I really didn't want two different blues. I didn't want the blue of the background and the blue of the map. So I went to remove background. And then I could select the area that I wanted to remove. And you can adjust the size of the area. And then you can also zoom in for finer control. And this is something you probably just have to play with a little bit to get the hang of it. But I wanted you to know that you can remove the background in a picture. And that's how I got this map having just the background of my slides. Making text pop. Now, if you followed my advice on using pictures that take up the whole slide, sometimes it's a challenge figuring out where to put your text. So here is a picture of Muay Thai boxing. If I put the text here, it's really kind of hard to read. So I might say, well, here's a little bit better because I have more contrast between his skin and the letters. You could also use a shaded box or a gradient box where it goes from darker to all the way transparent at the top. Here I took that gradient box and I extended it all the way across the slide on the bottom. I flipped it and extended it all the way across the top as well. So this shows you where the gradient boxes were. And this just makes your text pop a little bit more. When I say pop, I mean to make the contrast greater so that it is easier to read and more noticeable. Some bonus tips on keyboard shortcuts that I wish I had known when I was starting out with PowerPoint. Sometimes you're trying to move an object and you move it with your mouse and you can't get it exactly where you want it. If you use the Control key and then the arrow key to move things, they'll move just a tiny bit and you can get the exact placement of the item that you want. Also, if you want to have an object copied, a shortcut is to press the Control while dragging the object and it will make another copy of the object. This is a great one. Use B for black screen. So on my remote, I can press right here and that'll make the screen black. But also on my computer, which is right in front of me, if I press on the B key, that will make my screen black. Now, you probably have slightly different keys than I do, so you might have to figure out what key is for you that does that. But that's very useful. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to make a black screen? Sometimes you want to tell a story, and you don't want people looking at what's on the screen. So you can use B or use your remote to black out the screen so that the attention will not be on the screen while you're telling the story. Delivery. The three most important things when it comes to having a confident delivery is practice, practice, and more practice. In fact, right now, this is my first practice for this talk. We'll see how it turns out. One of the things I found invaluable in having my PowerPoint or any presentations go well is to have a checklist of things to remember. Here's a sample PowerPoint checklist. I'll need my laptop and some things that go with the laptop. I'll make sure I have my power cord and possibly an extension cord. I probably will need to bring a projector if one isn't provided. I may have handouts that I have for my presentation that I'll have to remember to bring. I have some things like extra batteries for my remote. And you can develop your own checklist. One of the things that I've always brought to presentations where someone else introduces me is an actual written out introduction. Because even if I email it to the person ahead of time, half the time they forget to print it out or they leave it at home. So if you have someone else introducing you, always give them your introduction at the event. The best laid plans sometimes go awry. Sometimes things don't work out the way you plan. You need a plan A, you need a plan B, you might even need a plan C. For most of my presentations, I am prepared to give them without any PowerPoint at all, which means I have an outline of the presentation just in case the PowerPoint doesn't work. I also have a plan in case the PowerPoint starts acting strange. I had a presentation a few weeks ago where I found out too late that the remote was too far away from the computer and my PowerPoint didn't really work right. So my plan B was to do more audience interaction. So I had people come up, we did some more activities, and it actually turned out even better. Because PowerPoint shouldn't be what your presentation is all about. PowerPoint is merely the support of your presentation. The concept of show, then tell. Especially if you have a lot written on a slide, which I don't recommend. Don't be talking if people are reading your slide. So go ahead, have the slide come up, give people a moment to read what's ever on it, and then talk. Because people do not read and listen very well at the same time. In fact, if someone's talking when I'm reading a slide, it just kind of annoys me. Remember, when it comes to delivering, the most important things are to practice, practice, and practice again. So you might catch things that you didn't know and your delivery will be smoother than it was if you hadn't practiced. A few additional resources for you. I don't know how available they are in your country. There is an online tutorial system on lynda.com on PowerPoint by David Diskin that is excellent. I recommend it highly. There's also a book that's very inspirational called Presentation Zen. It will make you want to have beautiful, simple, uncomplicated slides. And you can also find a reference book, for example, PowerPoint 2010 for Dummies. Remember, plan your presentation. Why? Why should your audience care? Your presentation needs to be focused about your audience. Remember the 4 easy design principles. Remember what they are? Go big, the rule of thirds, contrast, and most importantly, less is more. You had a few tips and tricks. Probably the most important one is that you can make your screen go black and deliver with confidence by having a checklist so you don't forget things, and also practicing, because you don't want to have another boring PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.